Um, Welcome, everyone, and thanks for joining us on this custom-tailored deep dive. We are really thrilled to have you with us today because we were looking at a topic that is quietly but radically reshaping the modern world right beneath our feet. I mean, the AI revolution isn't just about, fun chatbots or writing emails faster anymore. It has genuinely triggered a massive, high-stakes arms race in cybersecurity.
Yeah, it really has. And the ripple effects of that arms race are fundamentally changing how the largest organizations on Earth build, buy, and, well, secure their digital infrastructure. We're moving from a world of passive defense to one of high-speed autonomous warfare, where the attackers and the defenders are both armed with advanced artificial intelligence.
Exactly. And to understand the front lines of this war, we're pulling from a really fascinating stack of source material today. We've got CrowdStrike's Q4 2026 earnings report and their conference call transcript from March 3, 2026. So our mission for this deep dive is pretty clear. We're going to unpack exactly how CrowdStrike just delivered a truly blockbuster financial quarter, crossing a historic industry milestone in the process. And we're going to discover how they are actively weaponizing AI to build what their CEO calls an impenetrable opportunity ocean. Okay, let's unpack this. Where do we even begin with numbers of this magnitude?
We'll begin by looking past just the raw financials, massive as they are, to explain the deeper architectural shift happening in enterprise tech right now. These earnings aren't just a quarterly scorecard. They're a reflection of a massive structural migration. When a company reports the kind of numbers CrowdStrike just did, it tells us that the broader market has fundamentally agreed with their vision of the future. So we're really going to look at the why behind the what.
I love that framing. But we do need to touch on the what first, because looking at their internal metrics, they seem to be entirely defying the gravity of the software industry right now.
Yeah.
I know the scale of the Q4 numbers is huge, but can you put into perspective just how big this was?
Absolutely. So their net new ARR, their annual recurring revenue, hit an all-time record of $331 million for just this single quarter. That is up 47% year over year. But the real headline, the one that had the whole industry talking, is their total ending ARR. They just crossed the massive $5.25 billion mark, growing at 24% year over year.
Which is wild. And for you listening, to put that in industry context, CrowdStrike is the fastest and currently the only pure-play cybersecurity software company to ever reach this $5 billion milestone. I mean, reaching that rarefied air while actually accelerating net new growth is practically unheard of in enterprise software. Usually, the bigger you get, the harder it is to maintain those high growth percentages.
Right, the law of large numbers usually kicks in. Which brings us to the most important part of this financial picture. This isn't just a story about top-line growth at all costs, which we see a lot in tech. It is a profound profitability story. Their free cash flow hit a record $376 million for the quarter. That means 29% of their revenue is turning directly into free cash flow.
That margin is incredible for a company investing so heavily in R&D.
It really is. And if you zoom out to the entire year, they generated $1.24 billion in free cash flow, with operating income also hitting a record $326 million for Q4. They are scaling incredibly profitably.
Now, I want to push back on those profitability metrics just a little bit because I noticed a specific operational detail buried in their forward-looking guidance. They raised their fiscal year 2027 targets. They're guiding for an ARR somewhere between $6.466 billion and $6.516 billion. But there's an accounting tweak happening underneath the hood, right? They're changing their sales commission amortization period from 4 years to 5 years. Are they just moving numbers around on a spreadsheet to look more profitable on paper?
That's a very fair question to ask. It's not exactly a magic trick, but it is a strategic accounting shift that definitely gives the bottom line a noticeable bump. Because their customers are staying longer, they can justify spreading out the cost of paying their salespeople over 5 years instead of 4.
So it's tied to real customer retention.
Exactly. It reflects the reality of their customer retention, sure. But functionally, spreading out that expense will inherently boost their non-GAAP operating income by an estimated $85 million to $95 million in fiscal year 2027. It frees up nearly $100 million on paper.
Got it. But that kind of financial engineering only works if your core product is truly indispensable, right? I mean, if customers are churning, you can't amortize those commissions over 5 years. Which leads us to why customers are sticking around the AI threat. The executives spent a lot of time on the earnings call discussing the dark side of the AI boom. Adversaries are using AI to attack with increased speed, sophistication, and precision. George Kurtz even mentioned this is actively fueling nation-state cyber activity in the Middle East right now.
What's fascinating here is how Kurtz views the entire software market through this exact lens. He divides the software industry into two distinct camps in what he calls this new agentic era. The first camp is what he labels existentially vulnerable.
And what makes a company existentially vulnerable in an era of AI agents? Is it just having old code?
It's deeper than that. It's about their fundamental business models. These are your legacy tools, your nice-to-have productivity features, and static point products tied to old per-seat pricing models. Think about it. If an AI agent is doing the work of 10 humans, a software company that charges per human seat is going to see their revenue collapse. In a world of autonomous AI, those traditional models are dead weight.
So if that's the vulnerable camp, who survives?
The second camp are the companies that will thrive. These are the providers of mission-critical infrastructure. But crucially, he defines them as net data creators.
Net data creators. Okay, unpack that for me.
These are platforms generating novel, real-time, proprietary data that doesn't exist anywhere else on the public internet. Because that proprietary data is the fuel required to actually make AI deliver real business outcomes safely.
And that brings us perfectly to CrowdStrike's structural moat. I saw they process something like 1 trillion security events every single day.
Yeah.
1 trillion. And that happens across 2 trillion vertices in what they call their threat graph.
The scale of that data collection is just staggering. And for anyone wondering what a vertex is in this context, think of a vertex as a digital handshake or connection point. It's a laptop talking to a cloud server or an application accessing a secure file. CrowdStrike is mapping 2 trillion of those interactions continuously.
But collecting data is one thing. How does that actually make their AI better than a standard large language model?
Here is the critical distinction. They leverage what they call cyber-reinforced learning from human feedback, or RLHF, at a massive scale. When a company trains a standard generative AI model, they scrape public internet text. But CrowdStrike's AI isn't trained on blog posts or Wikipedia articles.
Right, it's trained on actual threats.
Exactly. It's trained on the real-time telemetry generated by elite threat hunters and incident responders stopping actual live breaches in the wild. That is expert-labeled data. You cannot scrape it and you cannot buy it. It has to be earned in the trenches.
That leads to one of the most memorable quotes from the earnings call. The CEO stated, "In cybersecurity, you simply cannot have a hallucination. You can't prompt twice. It's first time final." That just hits hard. It really highlights the difference between a chatbot making a math error in a marketing email and a security AI missing a nation-state hacker trying to take down power grid. The stakes are literally existential.
You don't get a do-over in a data breach. And what organizations are waking up to is that the attack surface is expanding faster than they can comprehend, entirely from the inside.
Let me jump in with the stats on that because it blew my mind. CrowdStrike sensors detected over 1,800 distinct AI applications currently running on enterprise devices across their customer base. And that represents 160 million unique instances of AI tools being used by employees. Every single one of those tools is ingesting corporate data. Every single one is a potential vulnerability. It is a visibility nightmare for an IT team.
So organizations are terrified of what their own employees are doing with shadow AI. They need visibility immediately, which is why CrowdStrike's newly launched AI-DR product AI detection and response grew 5x quarter over quarter.
Wow, 5x?
Yeah, it proves there's an immediate, desperate market demand for securing the usage of all these new AI tools. But having the best technology is only half the battle. You also have to fundamentally change how customers actually buy it.
Here's where it gets really interesting. I saw some massive numbers around their Falcon Flex adoption. How is this new subscription model actually changing the way enterprise procurement works?
Traditionally, enterprise software procurement is a total nightmare of licensing agreements, calculating seat counts, and red tape. If a security team wants to turn on a new feature to stop a new threat, they have to go beg the finance department for budget, which takes months. Falcon Flex changes the conversation entirely. It removes that friction.
How does it do that?
It gives customers the flexibility to adopt new modules instantly, drawing down from essential commitment without going back to purchasing every single time.
And the market is clearly responding to that lack of friction. The Flex cohort ARR reached $1.69 billion. That is up over 120% year over year. They added over 350 Flex customers just in Q4 alone. If you break it down, that means they were adding nearly 4 new Flex customers every single day of the quarter, and the average Flex customer's ending ARR is over $1 million, But I have to ask, is this just an all-you-can-eat buffet discount designed to artificially pump up user numbers?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's not about discounting at all. It's about compounding value. The true genius of the flex model lies in a metric they call the reflex.
The reflex. I like the sound of that.
It's very clever branding. A reflex is when a customer organically expands their flex commitment after seeing the value. Over 23% of flex customers have already reflexed. For context, that was only 5% back in Q1.
Wow, that is a massive jump in less than a year.
It is, and the revenue impact is undeniable. The average ARR lift after a customer reflexes is 26%, and that usually happens within just 7 months of the initial deal. But it gets even crazier when you look at the repeat reflexers, about 6% of the flex base. These are customers who expand and then expand again, seeing an additional 48% ARR lift.
It's almost half their original spend added back on top.
Exactly. It creates its own internal flywheel. A customer tries a new module because it's frictionless, they see immediate value, their data improves the overall AI, which provides better security, leading them to increase their financial commitment.
To make that tangible for you listening, there was a specific mega deal mentioned on the call that illustrates this perfectly. A major enterprise software player started out just using one single module threat intelligence, and they were spending in the low six figures. But through the frictionless flex model, they slowly started turning on more capabilities. Eventually, they expanded their usage to 25 different modules. That initial small deal blossomed into a massive $86 million total contract value. That is the raw power of removing friction from the sales cycle.
It is, but let's be realistic. You can't cross-sell $86 million worth of basic antivirus software. A frictionless buying model only works if the broader platform actually has best-in-class products to expand into. This brings us to their strategy of platform consolidation.
Right, because it is not just their traditional endpoint security driving all this growth anymore. The executives heavily emphasized the big three growth engines: cloud, next-gen identity, and next-gen SIEM. Collectively, these three areas grew more than 45% year over year to reach $1.9 billion in ending ARR. Let's break those down, starting with identity, because this seems crucial. It grew 34% to $520 million in ARR, and their Adaptive Shield product specifically grew over 300%. Why is identity suddenly the hottest space in cyber?
Because the nature of hacking has fundamentally changed. Internal data shows that 80% of breaches today are non-malware based. Hackers aren't writing complex code to break through a firewall anymore. They're simply buying compromised credentials on the dark web and logging in. Your identity is the new perimeter.
Speaking of perimeters, let's talk about the cloud business. That crossed the $800 million ARR mark. How are they convincing companies to switch cloud security providers?
Performance and speed. There was an amazing anecdote about an 8-figure cloud deal where a customer literally ripped out their existing security provider to install CrowdStrike's runtime protection. The result of that switch was a 90% reduction in their mean time to detect and respond to threats.
90%, that is huge.
Right. When you can walk into a chief information security officer's office and prove a 90% performance gain, ripping out a competitor becomes a very easy choice.
Speed seems to be the ultimate currency here. And we see that same disruption happening in the third pillar, next-gen SIEM. For those less familiar, SIEM stands for Security Information and Event Management. It's basically the central nervous system or the giant database for a security team's logs. CrowdStrike's SIEM business grew 75% to $585 million ARR. They highlighted a Fortune 500 retailer that replaced their legacy SIEM with CrowdStrike, resulting in 80% faster query performance.
Which is massive when you're under attack.
Exactly. When you are actively hunting a hacker moving laterally through your network, an 80% speed increase in your search queries is the difference between stopping a breach and being on the front page of the Wall Street Journal.
Speed is everything. And to ensure they maintain that speed advantage across the platform, they've been highly strategic with recent acquisitions, picking up companies like SGNL, Seraphic, and Pangea.
Now, I want to challenge this M&A strategy because looking at the financials, these acquisitions will only add about $5 million to $8 million in acquired ARR in Q1. But at the same time, CrowdStrike is going to incur $74 million to $80 million in integration expenses for the fiscal year. They are spending $80 million to integrate $5 million of revenue. Isn't that a massive financial risk if this thesis doesn't pan out as fast as they think?
On a purely short-term spreadsheet, it looks really expensive. But if you analyze the underlying technology, these are critical long-term architectural plays. They aren't buying revenue. They're buying the locks to the new front doors of the AI era. Let's look at SGNL. They provide zero standing privilege.
Zero standing privilege. What does that look like in practice?
In plain terms, that means an employee doesn't just have permanent admin access to a database. They only get access for the exact 5 minutes they need to do a specific task, and then the privilege vanishes. It makes stealing a credential utterly useless.
And what about Seraphic and Pangea?
Seraphic secures the enterprise browser. The browser is essentially the new operating system for most knowledge workers, so you have to secure it natively. And Pangea powers their AI DR product, helping detect rogue AI usage. CrowdStrike is eating the short-term integration cost today to build a structural moat around identity, the browser, and the AI agent itself for the next decade.
That long-term architectural thinking makes sense when you put it that way. And that same thinking is evident in how they're building out their ecosystem. They know they can't secure the gloat alone. Looking at their partner expansion, the growth of their MSSP business managed security service providers is explosive. In just over 3 years, that segment rocketed from under $100 million to over $1.3 billion. They're essentially arming an entire external army of partners with their technology.
And we absolutely cannot ignore the hyperscalers in this ecosystem conversation. CrowdStrike transacted nearly $1.5 billion on the Amazon Web Services marketplace alone, growing nearly 50% year over year. They are embedding themselves directly into the cloud infrastructure where their customers live and build. But this raises an important question regarding competitive dynamics. What about Microsoft?
Right. Historically, there has been a lot of well-documented friction between pure-play cyber vendors and a giant like Microsoft, who bundles security with their enterprise licenses.
Exactly. But this quarter highlighted a massive watershed moment for the industry. CrowdStrike is now officially open for business on the Microsoft Azure marketplace. CEO George Kurtz and Microsoft CEO Satya Nadella actually spoke to the go-to-market team together. Customers can now use their committed Microsoft Azure consumption dollars to buy CrowdStrike's Falcon platform.
That is a seismic alliance. They are moving from being direct competitors to acting as strategic ecosystem partners. It seems like a recognition by both giants that the threat landscape is simply too vast and moving too fast for zero-sum games.
It's a pragmatic realization that security is a team sport now.
So what does this all mean? We've thrown a lot of billions, growth percentages, and technical concepts at you today. But for anyone trying to understand the future of the enterprise, this deep dive proves one absolute truth. AI adoption and AI security are inherently permanently linked. You cannot safely deploy 1,800 different AI apps across your workforce without an independent structural security layer monitoring every single move they make.
If you distill everything we've discussed down to its core, CrowdStrike's real moat is not just a clever algorithm. Algorithms can be commoditized. Their true moat is the proprietary, human-validated telemetry gathered from stopping actual global breaches, combined with a frictionless flex buying model that makes adopting their platform the path of least resistance for an enterprise. They have successfully married technical superiority with go-to-market innovation.
It really is a masterclass in scaling a modern tech company. But as we wrap up, I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over something that builds on everything we've talked about today, but wasn't explicitly in the earnings call. The tech industry is projecting that we are rapidly moving into an era where an individual knowledge worker might have up to 90 different AI agents operating on their behalf in the background.
90 agents.
90. Booking flights, analyzing data, executing code, sending emails. When you have that much autonomous software running constantly, the digital battleground shifts entirely. We are entering a reality where malicious AI attacks corporate AI at sub-second speeds that human beings can't even perceive. And when autonomous security agents, like CrowdStrike's Charlotte AI, are the only things capable of fighting back in those split seconds, what happens to the human in the loop? Are we, as workers, leaders, and defenders, merely becoming spectators in an invisible, high-speed digital war taking place on our own laptops?
It's a profound, slightly terrifying question. And it's one that every organization and frankly every individual is going to have to grapple with sooner rather than later.
It absolutely is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you walk away with a clearer, more nuanced picture of the AI security landscape and the forces shaping our digital future. Keep questioning, keep learning, and we will catch you on the next deep dive.